Your EOS rules your world. Have you upgraded yours lately? We're going to talk about it on today's podcast. I've spent the last 20 years studying, teaching, and coaching people to find their greatness and take their lives to the next level. Along the way, it's become evident that emotions are at the root of everybody's successes and failures. Worry and fear are the enemies, and it's time to forge the armor and earn the tools to overcome the two things that could single-handedly destroy your future. Hi, my name is Michael Johnson, and I'm a life coach, a peak performance trainer, and I'm the emotions guy. It's time to take back control of how you feel, control of how you act, and control of how you experience life. It's time to become a lifer, a new breed of overachiever focused on living every minute to its fullest. We are responsible for how we feel, and no one and no thing can make us feel anything. Emotional mastery is our journey, and emotional education and intelligence is the key. We are lifers, and this is Magic for Life. What's up, lifers? Michael Johnson here. I'm so glad that you guys are here today. What is your EOS? Well, I bet you want to know. What are your thoughts? What are your guesses? What the heck could EOS stand for? Well, come on, it's Magic for Life, and you know the things that I like to talk about, right? You know I like to talk about our emotions, and in this particular instance, we are talking about your emotional operating system. And so that's your EOS, your emotional operating system. And honestly, it's one of those things that gets avoided like the plague. Like, heaven forbid we talk about our emotions because that's just too hard to discuss. And so we're going to discuss this operating system, this emotional operating system. And here's my question for you. When was the last time you audited your emotional operating system? Well, first of all, you may not have considered it a whole system, but listen, let's think about our phone for a second. If you don't upgrade your operating system for your phone, then what happens? Well, it'll eventually start running slower, and if you don't keep managing the space, the hard drive, and the memory that you have available, then it'll get slower. And if you don't put the upgrade, or if you don't have space and you don't upgrade your phone, then it's going to keep getting more and more sluggish, and pretty soon you might think you need a new phone. But the truth of the matter is that it's not actually true. It's not actually true. You don't need a new phone. Well, maybe not initially, but you don't need a new phone. What you need is you need to upgrade. And if you can upgrade, you do that for a while. And if you haven't noticed, things like Microsoft, like with Windows, they recently, well, I guess it wasn't recently, maybe about a year ago, they decided they weren't going to support some of their old operating systems. And so I think it was like Windows 7. They were like, yep, we're not supporting that anymore. So you can use it. Go ahead and use it if you want to, but there are going to be problems, and we're not going to create any fixes for the bugs. And so eventually, using that operating system is going to be obsolete. And so they just won't support it anymore. Well, imagine that with your emotions and the way that you operate using your emotions. Well, first and foremost, you learned how to use your operating system from a number of sources through the years. You learned from your parents straight away. If you cried, they gave you what you were hoping for. Sometimes they sucked at giving you what you wanted, and sometimes they were great at giving you what you wanted. And you used your crying system, which was the only one you had to communicate with, to work this communication out with your parents. And over time, you learned how they communicated, you learned what they wanted, you learned how they expected you to act. And so in all of these moments, you learned what you needed to do. So this was the beginning of your emotional operating system. And we slowly went through our journey to get to where we're at today. And we learned from our parents, we learned from our teachers in school, we learned from our grandparents and extended family, we learned from our boyfriends and girlfriends, we learned from our bosses and employers, we learned from the government, from social media, we start learning from movies and entertainment environment and our friend group, right? So these are all these different areas outside of us that we learned how to utilize our emotional operating system. Unfortunately, none of those were designed to actually teach you how to use it and optimize it. They were only designed to teach you how to use it to please them. Now, think about that for just a second. Just pause and think about it. I'll say it one more time. They taught you how to use your emotional operating system in order to teach you how to please them. And in many instances, they disguised it in a wrapper that said, we're teaching you how to be happy. But what they were really teaching you how to do is how to be happy that I am happy, or that they were happy, or that it could be happy, whatever that thing that was teaching you this system is. And so you have to ask yourself at this point, why were there not classes specifically designed for this in elementary school? You know, when you're at the peak of your learning, right? When you're in that place where everything is new and everything is getting into the mind and the body and the soul. Why was it not taught then? Why was it not taught in middle school when we were going through puberty? Why was it not taught then in high school when we had the peak of our intelligence coming into play, our ability to discern and think? Why was it when we were being taught to think in college that they didn't teach us how to manage this and utilize this system that is innately given to us and put into us as we are entering this world? We all have this amazing operating system, and I call it your emotional operating system. And it's how you deal with your everyday experience, your life as a whole. So I wrote down a few things for you, and I wanted to kind of give you an idea, like if I were to do an audit on your emotional operating system, these are some of the things that we would talk about, right? We would go in, we would discuss this, and we figure out where the gaps are, because in so many instances, you've had this experience where you know something is up, you know something's wrong, but you just can't put your finger on it. You're not sure what it is or where it's coming from or why it is even happening. And so I want you to think about this audit, right? I'm just going to go through briefly here because this is a lot to take in, right? But we have some things that determine and are part of our emotional operating system. I'm just going to cover the major ones, right? There are a bunch of things, and we could actually dig really deep into this. But one of the first things on the list is your filters. How good are your filters? Well, what are your filters? Your senses, your touch, your sight, your sound, right? Your taste, your smell. How good are your filters? How good are your filters? And that's a rough question to answer, but I want you to think about that, and we could chat about it more if you have more questions, right? The next thing up is, I call it your meaning generator. Your ability to generate meaning. See, all sorts of things are coming in through those filters we just talked about that you could be really good at or really not so good at, right? And the stuff that comes in gets filtered, and now you're going to give it meaning. How good are you at giving meaning to situations? Remember, we can make things a little bit better, or we can make things a little bit worse. How good are you at giving new meaning to situations? How practiced are you? Do you have a standard operating procedure to practice that on a regular basis? Because if you don't, maybe you need one. And maybe you've noticed that as you go through your life, sometimes situations in business and family and relationships and all of those things come up, and you don't know how to handle them because you haven't learned how to give different meaning to situations. All right, that's a deeper conversation. I could talk about that for hours and hours on end. So the next one up on the list is emotional execution ability. How is your ability to execute the emotion that you intend and want to feel? How good is that ability? Are you executing your emotions on purpose in the first place? This is huge. This is a really, really big deal. Yeah. So we have next on our list, your daily automations. What are your daily automations? And I'm talking about this from a very internal perspective, because we have these automations set up, these routines that we set up on a daily basis. And how good are your routines? Has anybody ever looked at them? Have you ever told anybody what your routines are besides the external ones? What if we went through and audited those? Boy, that'd be helpful. What if you were to actually go through and audit your emotional operating system by looking at your daily automations? You brush your teeth at the same time in the same way and do all of these things in the same way every day. What if some of those things were actually taking you down the wrong path? What if you audited them and you looked at it and you went, gosh, maybe that led to this and to this and to this. And as you actually start to evaluate it, you realize, man, I need to change that up. Right? And that includes things like your morning routine. What kind of playlists do you have that you utilize during the day? What kind of playtime automations have you done on a daily basis to make sure that you stay in line? Right? I don't mean in line with the government or rules, I mean in line with yourself. Right? That's a big question. What kind of automations do you have for your work schedule? What kind of automations do you have for your family time? What kind of automations have you set up to keep your emotional operating system healthy and strong? Right? Next up on the list, your communication abilities. This is huge. Not only your communication abilities to the outside world, but your communication abilities internally as well. How do you communicate to yourself? This is huge. Successful people, the most successful people in athletics, in business, in whatever it is that you want to use as the topic heading, those successful people have found ways not only to communicate well to other people, but they have found ways to communicate better to themselves and continue to progress that communication to themselves on a regular basis so that they can continue to grow. Right? Another one on the list is your belief system. How is your belief system? When was the last time you took a good look at the beliefs that you have currently and started to evaluate them as to whether or not they're useful for you anymore? Because they could actually have turned into limiting beliefs for you today because it was something that happened to you 20 years ago. It might not be pertinent. You might have learned new things since then. Taking a look and auditing your belief system within this emotional operating system is huge. You've got to take a look at that belief system. And then, of course, one of my favorite topics is your personal legend progress. Right? When we're talking about our emotional operating system, we want to look at our personal legend progress and ask ourselves, are we moving towards our personal legend? Because when your soul is in angst, when your inner being is going, God, for the love, go that way, and you're going this way, man, there is a whole lot of stress put on your emotional operating system. And so it's sort of a lot like trying to run Windows on a Mac. Right? Macintosh has their perfectly fine operating system. Windows has their perfectly fine operating system. Both people will argue venomously that one is better than the other, but the truth of the matter is that you try to cross them and it doesn't work, and you know that because when you've tried to cross operating systems before, oftentimes it just doesn't work very well. And so think about this. You're moving towards your personal legend, or you're not, or you haven't figured out what your personal legend is, or you haven't realized it yet. Those are all things that are all part of this emotional operating system. We've got to find a way as entrepreneurs to make sure that we are on track in each one of those settings, right? To audit each one of those things. Now, you can go do all of this yourself, which is why I brought it up today, and that's why I'm bringing it up in this group. I would love for you to go do that. Go write those things down and go take some time to really audit what you're doing, where you're at. You might be amazing in some of those areas. I would assume you are. And you might suck in some of the other areas. I would also assume you do, right? Because we are all growing. We are all getting better. We all have places through this emotional operating system where we are really excellent. And we all have places where we really suck. The question is, do you know where they are? And do you know where your shortcomings are? And how can we get those back on track and moving in the right direction, and how can we get that operating system that we work with on a daily basis to become something that is more positive and can be used for something greater, right? Our personal legend progress. How can we get all of those in sync, and how can we set up a system that can continue to upgrade as the time goes by? Because here's the thing, we can't keep operating off of our old system. You can't keep using that story of when you fell off your bike when you were 10 and it was green instead of blue, and therefore it changed your whole direction of. You can't keep operating off of those. We have to upgrade. We have to get new versions of our stories that are going to be empowering as we move forward. And this is what I would challenge you to do today. Now, of course, if you need some help, let me know. Reach out and let me know. We are here in this group. I'm excited for you guys to all be here. I'd love to hear your comments, and I'd love to hear your thoughts and ideas about these concepts, because there's a lot here to unpack, and literally I just did the overview because I could talk about each one of those for days, and I do in lots of other scenarios. But I would love to hear your thoughts. I'd love to hear where maybe you feel like you're falling short and you need some assistance, and we can dig into some of the areas that are challenging for you, and let's support each other, and let's be able to give some feedback to everybody in the group. I appreciate you all being here, and I'm excited to continue to provide as much value as I can. I'd love to hear from you. Reach out when you can. Put your thoughts in the post below, and we'll see what we can come up with. We'll see you next time. Take care, lifers. Bye-bye. Happiness is a choice. Sadness is a choice. All emotions are a choice. Sometimes doing our emotions doesn't seem like it's our choice, but it is. You have control. You are the captain of your ship, and you must learn how to be the best captain you can be. Let me show you how. Pick up your free copy of my new book, Every Minute, at everyminutebook.com.